You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Detroit City of Champions, the podcast based on the trilogy of books by
Charles Avison.
Charles, I'm Jamie Flanagan. I am a washed-up radio DJ.
Yeah, right. This is a rise of Jamie right here.
It is. It's. Charles, I'm having a blast doing this with you.
Yeah, it's great. I love it, man. I look forward to it every week, man.
We talked about a couple things already. You know, we talked about just a bit of the background and just how the city was in a shambles. 32, 33 were awful. And 34 was on a bit of an upswing, right? Things turned around a little bit.
A huge bit of an upswing. 34 was a huge year for Detroit, for the Tigers.
And the thing about the thing about it is the characters, right?
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about in that episode. We talked a lot about the characters and just the kooky names and the kooky people, and Schoolboy Row and Flea and just an amazing parade of people. And then they did really well in the series. This close, right?
Yeah, Game 7.
Down to Game 7.
Game 7.
And then that brings us to 35, right?
Yep.
Some high expectations because
great expectations for 35.
And Mickey pointed at the fence again.
Yeah, exactly.
And said, "This time we're taking the series this year, right?" So Mickey Cochran, we talked about him in one of the episodes because he was so critical to Detroit, the Tigers' turnaround.
He was huge, easily one of the most important free agents or trades, player acquisitions that the Tigers have ever made, and one of the most important in the history of baseball. I mean, you have one player comes to a team, and you could, it was virtually the exact same team from 1933 to 1934. The only difference really is the addition of Goose Goslin, who was viewed as like over the hill type hitter,
and then Mickey himself,
and so this one person comes in, and the the Detroit rattles off two incredible seasons. 1934, they win over 100 games. In 35, they actually win the World Series. So again, I have quotes throughout the book talking about how just every person in Detroit at that time. They all credited Mickey Cochran as the magic man, the guy that brought it all together, and this winning component, this near obsession with winning. And believing that they could do it is, just such a powerful, lesson, like this belief of winning. And he was the guy. Yeah.
And so, the 1935 team pretty much the same. Were there big changes? Many changes?
Man, it's funny that you say that, because this is exactly how I wanted to open the show, and I was actually hoping you were going to answer this, or ask me that question, or else because I was going to have to introduce it myself.
Man.
Yeah, we're in sync, totally, because there was because yes, the team was mostly the same. There's always a couple of guys here that come and go that pitch a game, they bring them up from the minor leagues, pitches one game, another guy gets a few at bats, whatever. But there was a huge addition to the 1935 Tigers, and it kind of ties in with the idea of, but to understand the concept is to understand like the differing nature of the 34 Tigers versus 35. 34 Tigers were totally unexpected. All the fans were completely caught off guard. They were taken for this incredible ride, and then they lose in the 7th game of the World Series, which is, we talk about the great expectations. So over this offseason, it goes from being, where they have no expectations for the team to being they want a World Series. It's World Series championship or bust. I mean, that's all that's on their mind. Yeah. And so there's caravans of fans going down to spring training. You've got such luminaries as like Walter Hagen that has been photographed down in Detroit spring training. Okay. You've got people like Newell Banks. We talked about the World Checkers champion from Detroit. He's down there playing games blindfolded. I mean, there's all these incredible scenes of everyone, fans and all this going down there. And one of the people that goes down there is the Tigers bat boy in 1934. And his name is Whitey Willis. He was the Tigers bat boy. He was 16 years old at the end of the 1934 season. And so Whitey Willis, but the problem is that Whitey Willis is going into high school. He's in high school, and so now really his reign as a bat boy has come to an end.
Okay.
Right, and so he's one of these people. But he actually hitchhikes his way down to Florida to watch spring training and to see some of his old friends. He's the Tigers net. He stays with a couple of them.
I love that.
Fishing with Heine Schubels and his family. And so he hitchhikes his way down there. So anyways, like I say, we're leading up into this 35 season with these massive expectations. And so in mentioning Whitey Willis is key because now the Tigers, so Whitey Willis is too old. He's going into high school, and he's beyond the age of the traditional sort of bat boy. So now the Tigers find themselves in a situation where, they need a bat boy, okay? And a lot of times the bat boy is an overlooked, component of this. But this is a potential World Series champion team, okay? They need, this bat boy just can't be. I mean, this bat boy is going to be the idol of the, from the very first day of every Detroit fan, every Detroit schoolboy, in the city. I mean, this has got to be somebody that's got some serious credentials. Okay. And so I have the guys written name. So Alex Okray was the clubhouse boss of the Detroit Tigers. He was the clubhouse manager in that of Navin Field. And he hears about this bat boy, okay? His name is Joe Roggin. His last name is spelled Roggin. So I hope I'm pronouncing
Go on to do great podcasts.
Yeah, so anyways,
that's it.
I know, that's what I was thinking. That's why I want to say Roggin, because I don't want anybody confused like this.
Different.
But yes, so anyways, so he hears about this. So there's a baseball league in Detroit called the Detroit Baseball Federation. And there's a team there called, I'm going to pronounce this, the Polish name, Skrzicki. So it's spelled Skrzykki, Skrzicki. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Okay.
But anyways, they've won 4 straight championships of this league. So they're already they're a legendary sort of Sandlot team. And they have a bat boy that has been with them for all 4 championships.
Okay.
Joe Roggin is the bat boy for this thing. So he's been the bat boy for 4 consecutive championships for this local Sandlot. And he started out as 8 years old for Skrzicki, and so by the time he gets brought to the Tigers, he makes it to the major leagues. This is his potentially 5th year. Joe, is potentially.
So he's like 8. What is he? 12?
So he's 13 years old.
Okay.
13 years old in 1935.
All right.
So he's 13 years old. And so, so this is a huge addition. They've just added a championship bat boy to the team with championship expectations.
Okay.
And so, this is a huge signing. This is huge.
God.
And so, anyways.
What the hell does a bat boy do?
Bat boy, so the concept is that whenever a player in the game, whenever a player gets a hit or whatever, they run out in the field, they grab the bat, they return it to the dugout.
Sure.
So they kind of clean up their area around home plate.
Well, especially like if there's someone coming into home.
Exactly. The umpire doesn't have time to worry about any of that.
Yeah,
the players don't have time to worry. So that's where the bat boy runs out, scrambles, grabs the bat, runs off.
Yeah.
And then and besides that, that's during the games, but when it's not a game, like behind the scenes, he does errands for the players. Like he gets their suits cleaned. He runs and grabs them with soda or beer, whatever. And then also one of the things that I saw was that we mentioned it in an episode about the Mickey Cochran was fining players, at one point for getting caught off first. Those fines went to the bat boy.
Oh my God!
Yeah, So that's
goes, hey, can you get picked off today? Because I could.
Yeah. So, but in Joe Roggen's case, one of the interesting things is that he developed a friendship with Hank Greenberg.
Yeah.
That Hank Greenberg would call him my pal Joey because he had this huge infectious smile.
Yeah.
Got really excited whenever the Tigers scored a run. And then, whenever Hank Greenberg, especially when Hank Greenberg came in, I've got fantastic photos in the books. I've got a whole section on Joe Rugg in the book. And I've got several different photos. You can see this infectious smile of his.
Yeah.
And that whenever Hank Greenberg, hit a home run especially, he expected to see Lucky Joe or standing at home plate to greet him. And I've got I've got a fantastic picture with Hank Greenberg shaking his hand, and Joe Rugg is just so excited to be there. So yeah, not to spoiler alert, the Tigers won the 1935 World Series.
Yeah.
And Joe Rugg completes his 5th straight year as a bat boy of a championship team. I think that's a fantastic.
I love that.
So he's the major addition to the team, and I was, I'm glad you asked that question.
I love that.
Yeah.
So there's bat boys. One of my students, because I teach high school during the week, and the family is like amazing. The Politis family, but JJ Politis, he was a bat boy or a ball boy for the Tigers for a bunch of years.
Really? Yeah. That's, like I say, that's
think
every
he worked the
childhood
third
dream,
base line.
man.
I think he worked the third base line.
Yeah.
His mom, before Karen Newman did the national anthem, she was the singer of the national anthem for a whole handful of years before Karen Newman took over. She kind of got bumped out. They're a little bitter about that still. And then Sarah, JJ's older sister, Sarah Politis, she's amazing. She was a superstar. She went on. She started a podcast. I helped her like launch this little podcast that she did in my classroom. She interviewed Jerry Mathers.
All right.
She interviewed, but it was the Popo show. It was positive. Powerful and positive people. She talked to him. She's a really uplifting message. So she talked to this guy who's a football player, and just was a really uplifting guy. And then she graduated from me, and she was going to USC and studying broadcasting and communications. And the guy that she had interviewed in my classroom, she stayed in touch with all these people. Mullally, the CEO of Ford. We went up to Ford World headquarters, top of the thing, and interviewed him. It's like she had some great connections. But this cat was like, she's heading into her junior year at USC, and the cat that she interviewed in my classroom, he's like, yeah. So what are you doing? You got an internship for this summer? And she's like, no, I don't have anything lined up yet. He's like, well, he goes, nobody knows yet. He goes, but I got a new gig starting. It was Michael Strahan.
Oh, all right. Jeez,
he's like, it was the summer he got the Michael and Kelly. So she went to New York and she became his right hand man. She produced the Pyramid. She ended up getting one of the producer credits on the Pyramid when they launched that. And that Politis family. But JJ was a ball boy for the Tigers.
You're the idol of the. I mean, like when I was a kid growing up watching the Tigers, like you maybe catch a glimpse of somebody being a bat boy. And, it's like. Yeah, they're you're like oh man, I wish I could go collect a bat for the Tigers. You like get an autograph.
It's hot out there on that third base line though. You're just getting baked in the sun.
But it just being you're sitting there looking, especially like I grew up around Old Tigers. With not around Old Tigers Stadium, but that was the stadium of my childhood, and it was like. To be a bat boy on Tiger Stadium would just would have been like that's all I'd be talking about right now. We'd be, instead of this city we'd be talking about. I'd have stories about being a bat boy for the Tigers. That's all I would be talking about. Literally.
So we got Rogan in there and his 5th championship.
Yeah, so that was the big. Really, that's the big addition.
That was really okay.
It's really the big addition to the team. And otherwise for the most part the team, the team it was relatively the same team. Like I said, there's a couple players here, here and there, to fill in gaps. But I do want to talk about. Actually, there was a guy that was almost potentially gonna join the team. Yeah. And this is I bring him in because there's virtually no information about his guy or this role in this. And but it kind of actually throws a light into the excitement of the Tigers at this time that he would potentially join. And so his name is Millard Dixie Howell, okay? And so this is probably the first podcast like ever to mention his name. Okay? So Millard Dixie Howell, but he's by no means like this guy is a mega star. Okay. So the story with Dixie Howell was that he was the quarterback in the 1930. It was the 1934 college football season, but it was the 1935 Rose Bowl. So it was just because the 34 season, and then the bowl games carry into January.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it was the 34 season, but the 35 Rose Bowl, and he was like a quadruple threat quarterback for Alabama. And Alabama was undefeated national championships. Won they played Stanford in this Rose Bowl. And he threw for 2 touchdowns in an era where the passing game was just really starting to get off the ground. And he threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for 2, just an incredible talent. And the touchdowns that it's like when you're reading 1930s stories, when you're diving when you're in that world, okay? Dixie Howell in 1934 was one of the number 1 stars in America. Okay, he was just an absolute sensation from college football. So because like I say, he quarterback of an undefeated Alabama team. throws 2 touchdowns to Don Hudson, who when Don Hudson is a very famous name because the very next year, Dixie Howell would go into baseball, but Don Hudson would go to play for the Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
And Don Hudson would like literally revolutionize the wide receiver position. Like he was incredible. And so, so both of these incredible athletes come out of this Alabama national championship. And so, and like to say, the 2 touchdowns that he threw in that game were both to Don Hudson, who again is he's a Hall of Famer in the NFL. He's just an absolute legend. And so, but Dixie Howell, he's not just a quarterback; he's a 2-sport star, and he's an incredible baseball player by every metric.
Dixie knows baseball.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. He was like sort of Bo before Bojack. Yeah. So he's viewed as just as talented in baseball.
Right.
And he signs with the Detroit Tigers.
Okay.
Like. This is like just huge. The Tigers go to the World Series in 1934, go to the 7th game. Again, let's keep in mind, before 1934, Tigers, they're lifeless. They got there's virtually, they're like, if he writes the article about how, they're just this team that nobody cares about. They don't make any big moves. Now, they went to the World, they signed Mickey Cochran, they go to the World Series, win 7 games, and now they just signed the biggest college superstar in the country. Dixie Howell signs with the Tigers. Like, I mean, it was just the biggest coup. It was just the biggest signing, and so you're a fan going, and there was the word on the street, the way that they were hoping to bring this along was that Dixie Howell would be starting in right field for the Tigers in 1935. Like going into spring training, like this is a guy like he's so good, he's going to skip right through the minor leagues. And he's going to be playing right field for the Tigers in 1935, which was Pete Fox's position in 1934.
Right.
And so, anyways, like I say, in spring training in 1935, Dixie Howell gets hit in the face by a there's a couple different stories. One saying that there was players playing a game called Pepper, which is like you're hitting the ball back and forth. Like there's just like 5 players that are, you're hitting the ball back and forth with a bat, and you're trying to keep the ball up in the air, kind of thing. But anyways, one thing says they're playing Pepper, but I don't believe that story because he fractured his eye socket and his jaw. Okay, there's a picture of him where he's wired shut, like his face is all messed up.
Yeah, that's Pepper really gone awry.
That's what I'm saying. Somebody usually in Pepper, you're just tapping the ball back and forth.
Yeah.
And so, but from another story is that there's a guy named Johnny Mize this is earlier in his career, and Johnny Mize is one of an absolute slugger of a freaking man, like he's just known for his home run hitting ability. And so the other story is that Johnny Mize hit a foul ball and Dixie Howell wasn't looking, and it just drilled him right in the face. And so that's the story I tend to believe. If your ball is going to fracture somebody's orbital socket and break their jaw, the chances are it was hit by a guy named Johnny Mize. And Dixie Howell wasn't looking at it, and it's like, so anyways, so he was lost for the season, and he never really got, he played a little bit in the minor leagues, but he never made it to the major leagues or anything. We never really heard of him again. Yeah, I mean, they heard of him, just in the world of sports, he never really lost his fame, but he hasn't really come down to us in any sort of significant form. So anyways, that left the Tigers because Pete Fox was good in 1934, but they're already here. They're thinking about potentially replacing him with Dixie Howell, and so now all of a sudden, this is like sort of Pete Fox's. They've got he's back in as a potential starter. And that's where this. And so this is kind of like where I want to take this story with the season is to begin. To kind of dive into like what happened. He played he played 128 games in 34. Pete Fox? Yeah.
And then 131. In 35. So he was definitely one of the mainstays there.
Exactly, but going into 35, the problem was in spring training. Like I say, the Tigers were looking for a little bit of an upgrade at the right field. He was good in 1934. But he wasn't necessarily great. I mean, he hit a lot of. There was. He was viewed as a talented player. But he had not yet really caught his stride. Like he had not really put it all together, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they go into spring training in 1935, and he didn't play well. His arm was hurt. He had sort of like a dead arm, I guess you'd say. Like there's something wrong with his arm. And they actually going into the season started trying other people out at right field to try to find Goose Goslin, whose position was left field traditionally. They tried to move him into right field, and it didn't work because the right field, especially like Tiger Stadium, there was a problem there, which is the sun beams almost right into a right fielder's eyes. So they call it the sun field. And so that sun field was not the easiest position to play. You had to be able to battle the sun, to make plays. And Goose Goslin really couldn't, he couldn't really handle that spot. Didn't fit his profile. And so they basically reinserted Pete Fox back in, and he ended up having one of the best years of his career. But there's actually more to the story than simply just going out in the field and tying into, and just having a great year. And that's kind of and that's like another sort of major difference from 34 to 35 is that in 34, it is what it is. The Tigers do what they do. But in the offseason of 1934, Goose Goslin, somehow for some reason or another, he was talking to a reporter in the offseason in his home in New Jersey. And he talks about Pete Fox in a very, very negative way, saying basically it was he was saying that the Tigers could do better in right field. That they could really use an upgrade.
Was this during spring training?
This was in the off season, so before spring training. So it was in the winter, after 1934, before 1935. And Goose Goslin's doing some interview with the newspaper, and he says, something along the lines of, the Tigers we could be a better team if we had a better right fielder. Yeah. And so now all of a sudden, Pete Fox swears this vow, I'm going to have not only the best season I've ever had, but I've actually got the quote if I'm going to read it. Let me read. I'll quote it. It really carries the.
Pete Fox had a long career. You find that quote, but Pete Fox,
he's great.
He had a long career. He went on he was with Detroit till 1940, and then went on to Boston, and had a couple really strong seasons with Boston too.
He was a great player. He was great. I mean, he wasn't a Hall of Famer, but he was great. I mean, he was really good. And 35 was really the year that sort of kicked it all off for him. Yeah. So, anyways, let me. Where's that? Okay, so here it is. All right. So I might as well read the whole thing. So it's like 3 or 4 paragraphs long. So I'll read the whole thing. So the article is written by Bud Shaver for the Detroit Times, who is the sports editor for the Detroit Times, and this is written after the 1935 World Series. And so this is Bud Shaver now. He says, "This is one of those now it can be told stories. It concerns the traditional rivalry between the Fox and the Goose, and it didn't turn out the way it was plotted, which is one of the reasons why we are glad we waited until now to tell it. The Fox is Irvin Pete Fox, right fielder of the Tigers. The Goose, of course, is Leon Goose Goslin, the Tigers' left fielder. Anyway, when the World Series ended last October, the Tigers scattered to their respective lairs. The Goose winged his way home to Salem. Fox wound up in Evansville, Indiana. Everything was lovely at Evansville that winter until one day Fox picked up the local newspaper and read a story which had been transmitted by a nationally known newspaper service. The dispatch was dated from Salem, New Jersey, and in it, the Goose, in a fit of unguarded garrulousness, delivered himself of a lot of uncomplimentary remarks about Fox. Among other things, he said the fellow couldn't hit, run, or throw. He was a terrible outfielder, and it caused the Goose great pain and humiliation to have to play on the same team with him, or words to that effect. Pete Fox clipped out that piece and kept it pretty much to himself, but he burned up plenty. He burned up so much that he didn't speak to Goslin all year long, except to take a hit and run sign. It was a rather ridiculous situation, but both guys, being ball players, never realized the ridiculousness of it. If one was playing cards on a Pullman and the other moved in, neither would give up his seat. They sat and played together with a strained politeness, which was very funny. It was pretty grim too. Fox promised himself he would out-hit, outrun, outplay, and outfield his critic. I don't know whether or not Goose knew this. If he did, he never let on. But the Fox was as sore as a boil. When he had a sore arm this spring, he wouldn't tell anybody. When the Tigers were getting ready to ship him away, he set his mouth in a grim line and played so well they couldn't." So Fox was out of the lineup for a long time during the early part of the season. Goslin played right field, the Sun field, while Pete sat on the bench. Pete sat there and didn't say a word. He didn't even sneer when Goslin muffed fly balls in the Sun field, one of which made Tommy Bridges go 2 extra innings in a game in Philadelphia. Finally, Pete got back in there because it was apparent he was the only outfielder who could play the Sun field. The Goose had a big start, but the Fox got after him immediately. The Fox started hitting like a streak. He ran up a hitting streak which excelled that of Goslin. He fielded brilliantly, threw well, but not a word did he say until the season was almost over, and then he took down his hair to this writer one night. So this is him talking to Bud Shaver. Fox told the whole story of his bitterness, his traditional feud with the Goose. I'm going to out-hit him by 20 points, outfield, throw out more men, make less errors, said Pete grimly. I'm going to outplay him from here to Evansville. I'm going to outplay him in the World Series, and when it's all over, I'm going to have it printed in every newspaper in the United States that Pete Fox is a better outfielder than Goose Goslin, and I'm going to back it up with results. I'm going to make the Goose eat his words, and I hope he chokes. We were a little uncomfortable with this harangue because we like both the Fox and the Goose, but the Fox wouldn't let up. I'm going to do it, Fox insisted. Look at the batting averages now. He'll never catch me. Look at the fielding percentages. He can't field with me, and I can even throw better than he can. Look at the record. This is the final paragraph here. So Fox made good his boast. He hit better and fielded better than Goslin during the regular season. Then came the World Series. Fox wound up the leading hitter of the entire series for both clubs. He fielded well. Nobody drove in more runs. Nobody got as many hits. Nobody hit for as many bases. Goslin made an error, so did Fox, but off the record, Fox was the much better outfielder. Charlie Grimm, manager of the Cubs, rated Charlie Gehringer number 1 man of the Tigers, Fox number 2. Goslin was way back in the hero sweepstakes. Then came the 6th game, and Goslin knocked in the winning run in the 9th inning with 2 out. So you can see there.
Yeah.
So you can see, like,
wow.
This idea, So that's
like all season tensions are high between these guys.
Exactly, and you can see, and so that to answer back to the question you had, as far as the difference in the teams, here's a man who is playing with like this vindictive streak, with this sense of like something to to prove and in a massive way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean. So like. That's something definitely different from the previous year. This is a whole, you see like the transfer from one season to the next. It's really sort of a different player who's, he's like, he's got something to prove. So.
Yeah, he did. He hit 321. Pete Fox hit 321, and Goose was 292. Mm-hmm. And then 15 home runs for Pete. 9 for Goose. And although RBIs, Goose had 109 and Pete only had 73.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the batting average much higher, more home runs.
Yeah, but what it did, having like
just
now having two guys that are going after each other, and Goose keep in mind, Goose Goslin's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Well, he's a tremendous hitter. I mean, this guy won a batting championship. I mean, he won a World Series with Washington. I mean, he was, some people might have called him over the hill when he joined the Tigers, but he had a great year in 1934. And, he had, for all intents and purposes, a great season in 1935. And here's Pete Fox saying, I'm going to play better than this Hall of Famer from here to Evansville. And so, that's just what I'm saying. So, like, it's sort of a different Pete Fox in 1935. Yeah. It's a different outfielder in 1935, you see. So this, and then there's other elements too. Like we talked about Schoolboy Rowe last week.
Sure, yeah.
In 1935, Schoolboy Rowe was a totally different pitcher. In 34, he was unstoppable. He was unhittable. They know he was the superstar of all of baseball. He had this huge romance with Edna Skinner we talked about. But in 1935, he had married Edna Skinner in the off season. They'd had a child, and his little Linwood, and he was sick, and there's no it doesn't. It's really my speculation, and I speculate in the book that the idea that the sickness of his newborn son is what led him to his early season struggles, and he struggled terribly in 1935. Terribly.
We were talking about this being the great expectations, and then the season kicks off, and they're struggling.
Exactly.
Schoolboy Rowe and the team overall.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So you have Schoolboy Rowe is a large part of it because he's one of their. Eldon Ocker says that Tommy Bridges was the ace of the team, and that Schoolboy himself were like. That we were the next aces. We were like the secondary because a lot of people would actually say that Schoolboy Rowe was like the ace, but I mean you're splitting hairs. But everybody there was such a high regard for Tommy Bridges that they all were like he's our ace. Like he was still sort of a young guy. I think he was 27 years old in 1934. And Schoolboy and Eldon Ocker were like in their 23, 24-year-old area. But Schoolboy was an incredibly important figure on that team. Incredible as a pitcher. It was like you had you had two aces for all intents and purposes with Tommy Bridges and Schoolboy Rowe, two aces, and with one of them, Bridges was okay in 35 from the very beginning, but Schoolboy Rowe was horrible, and so that's he got relegated to the bullpen in 1935, which the concept of the bullpen. is the bullpen is sort of like the guys that come in and fill, that pitch at the end of games whenever they need an inning or two, or especially back in this era when the pitchers basically pitched every game, all game. And the only reason they came out is if they were hurt or if they were playing bad. And that's when they brought in the bullpen.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of like a lot of times it would, there was games that they call them relievers pitch that were important. But for the star, for Schoolboy Rowe, the ace, one of the great pitchers in all of baseball, to be coming out of the bullpen was a tremendous I mean, that just shows you how bad he was. Like how bad, like they could not pitch him to start and it was a brief moment that they were bringing him out. It wasn't like he was relegated there for half the season or something. I think it was only a couple of games.
Mm-hmm.
But in either case, he started off the year, in a tough way. He was not good, and so. And I have there's a great article in the end of the second book that there's no way to read on here. It would take up the whole show. It's probably a 20-minute read.
Yeah.
But anyways, where Bud Shaver actually goes through the entire season, he does a fantastic job of narrating. He calls it he says Cochran is the captain of the ship that rode over these stormy seas because it was just up and down, up and down. I actually have a sort of a note of the timeline, sort of to give you an idea.
Yeah.
So I should have wrote down with the date of the first day of the season started, but it was just like a lot of seasons, early, late March, early April. But by May 30th, a month and a half, 2 months in the season, they're in fifth place. The Tigers are in fifth place. By June 20th, the team is in fourth. Is moved up a little bit, and they're in fourth place. So you're talking about maybe a third of the season's over, and they're still in fourth, fifth place. And so the main criticism of the 1934 Tigers, because they had come out of because they had played like such world beaters after being so terrible with virtually the same team, that people were saying they got lucky, that they tapped in, that they got lucky, they had a lot of momentum, they avoided injuries, they were sort of a fluke. And so that was the national media narrative. And so starting off the season in such a rough spot, it seemed to vindicate all the critics. I mean, it vindicated. They're all saying, the Tigers really were a flash in the pan.
Was there a point that was a turning point in 35
Once again,
for them?
We're in sync, man. I got it right here. Start on my notes. The turning point of the season.
What was the turning point in 35?
So you have so from June 30th to July 7th, the Tigers go on a 10-game win streak.
Right.
So that helps, right? I actually have a quote, a couple quotes at the end of the book where they actually say. Bud Shaver, the one quote I just mentioned to you with the Stormy Seas story, he actually says the 4th of July was the turning point. The 4th of July, because in that game, the Tigers are playing against the Tigers have, as I just mentioned, June 30th to July 7th, they were on a 10-game win streak. So this would have been their maybe sixth game in a row that they they won 10, but at this point they've won like 4 or 5 in a row. So they're playing against Cleveland Indians. They're playing against the Cleveland Indians, and the Tigers are down 5-4 in the ninth inning with 2 out.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and Mickey Cochran comes up to the plate, drills a home run to tie it. Okay, and then the Tigers go on to win it in the 11th inning, and so that extends that winning streak from 5 or 6 to whatever it was at that point to 7 games, and then they win 3 more. You see what I'm saying? So that 10 game, so that's when they say that they could have, it could have been a 4-game winning streak where they lost 1, and then the Tigers, the stormy ship keeps going up and down a little bit.
Yeah.
But the winning of that game, and then the winning of 3, they all said, like, and even at the end of the book, there's another quote I have where they're actually asking the Tigers, what was your favorite moment of the season? And 3 of the Tigers say that was it. When Mickey hit that home run, one guy says, that home run did things to me that I haven't experienced since I was a child.
Nice.
He was like, that was it. That was
pushed
a big
it to
thing.
extra innings.
Pushed it
to a win.
Tigers win the game, and they beat Mel Harder, who was one of the great pitchers. He was one of the great pitchers in the 1930s.
Yeah. So what was there somebody else who was a standout? Not necessarily one of the top stars. Was there somebody else who was a standout?
Once again, next point.
Okay.
Right on the thing. I mean, you read my cards.
No, I can't see.
Because it's like I actually was hoping to get to this guy too, because this is like because another mention by these players at the end of the year was that there's a great article because they ask all these different players, what was your favorite moment of the season? And so a bunch of them picked Mickey Cochran for that home run he hit, and then several more picked. There's a guy named Vic Sorrell. Okay, Vic Sorrell, and this is a name that like never gets any mention, and he didn't get hardly any mention in 1935, which is sort of the point of this player. His name is Vic Sorrell.
Okay.
So Vic Sorrell, he's like, in this, you have, when you're talking 34, 35 Tigers, you've got Schoolboy Rowe, like the picturesque athlete, 6'4", 6'5", whatever he was. Great looking guy, hero to the children, ace of eight, one of the ace. We've talked about Schoolboy Rowe. You've got Hank Greenberg. This guy is just, setting the world on fire. He's like the next Babe Ruthian type figure for the Tigers. Mickey Cochran, all these big names, right? But then you got Vic Sorrell. He's like Vic Sorrell. He wears like the round glasses, right? He's not like really doesn't really look like an athlete. He's kind of like a nerd, man. You look at him when you see a picture of Vic Sorrell. He doesn't really take the he just doesn't look like one of these these ball players that would be in like some kind of a cover of a magazine.
He looks like a scientist.
Exactly. He's like
old-timey scientist.
Exactly. He's like an old-timey bespectacled man. So anyways, Vic Sorrell been with the Tigers since 1928. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about, we've said it before, the Tigers when Mickey Cochran got there were either too young or they were too old. Well, Vic Sorrell was in the category of too old. He'd been with the Tigers since 1928. He had an incredibly mediocre career.
92 wins, 101 losses.
Yeah, he was. Leading up to that point, you can see for yourself. When you're looking at an ERA, earned run average for a pitcher, anything in the 3.6, 3.5, 3.6. That's really good. You know what I mean? He gives up 3.5 runs a game, basically. Per 9 innings, and then but with Vic Sorrell, you can see his ERA is like 4.5,
5.
Yeah, 5. This is a guy that he's the type of pitcher that he was good enough to like eat up innings. Like you could put him out there, you knew he would pitch 9 innings. Sometimes he would give up 3 or 4. Sometimes he would give up 6 or 7. He's just the kind of guy that that just he's a pitcher.
Right.
He's a pitcher. He's going to get some outs. Whatever. He's going to just be out there. But he has no superstardom around him at all. He's just like this guy that they put in whenever. So anyways, 1935, Vic Sorrell, again, Tommy Bridges, Schoolboy Rowe, Eldon Ocker, General Crowder we talked about, has this incredible magic season, from 34, and then he's also great in 35 again. And then Vic Sorrell's over in the corner. There's nobody. He's just a guy they throw in whenever they need a couple innings.
Hey, guys, I get to play this week.
Exactly. He just whenever they need him for something, really to pick up some innings, they put Vic Sorrell in. And so in 1935, that's the situation with Vic. There's all this incredible excitement around the Tigers, and then Vic's, he's part of the team still. He's got a baseball card out there.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, but for Vic in this season, the sort of the sad thing about Vic Sorrell was that his daughter had this illness, and I have it in the book somewhere. I'm not sure what the illness was. It escapes me what the actual illness was, but it was something that sort of carried on over the course of the season. And so he was really he would be at a game, and then when he had a day off, he would be at home trying to dealing with helping his daughter, to be with his daughter and stuff. So he was having kind of a not only just a rough personal season as well. So anyways, so the date is July 23rd, as we already mentioned, June 30th to June 7th. The Tigers on a 10-game win streak, and then now we're talking July 23rd. Okay, so the Tigers are just a shade behind the Yankees. Okay, they're just they're going into Yankee Stadium, and they have a 3-game series. Okay, but anyways, it's a 3 or 4 game series. But anyways,
so that'll swing
big
your
time
position.
Yeah. So anyway, so going in, maybe they played a 4-game series, but the idea is the last 3 games is what we want to talk about here. Okay, and so anyways, there was a doubleheader. Okay, in the first game of the doubleheader, Schoolboy Rowe loses to the Yankees 7-5. The Tigers at this moment are. What would it equate to? It's like a game and a half back of the Yankees. I have to do the math, or whatever, but because I'll get to a more precise measurement here in a second. Anyways, the Tigers, so the first, it's close. The Tigers are in second place, just behind the Yankees. Okay. So, anyways, Schoolboy Rowe loses the first game 7-5. Okay, exactly. And so the mighty Schoolboy loses this first game. And then the Tigers, like the way that the pitchers had been being used every day and all this different stuff, they literally had nobody. And so and you have to understand, this doubleheader was, this is key, because if the Tigers lose 3 in a row, they drop down in the standings. Now they have to win like 3, and the Yankees have to lose 3, so it makes it even more difficult. And so at this particular doubleheader, there was 66,000 fans in attendance for this doubleheader. 66,000, which shows you sort of the magnitude.
Let's send out the scientists.
Vic. Vic looks down the bench, and he goes, Vic,
well,
how's your arm feeling?
Whoever we send out there is going to poop themselves anyway.
Yeah, he's like, hey, Vic, how you doing? How's your arm feeling? Everybody's like, Vic, what are we?
You want to get us started?
Yeah,
so,
like,
do you know what
Vic.
the plan was? Was just they needed somebody to cover?
I mean, like, he wasn't really Vic did everything. He was a starter, he was a reliever, he would just he was a pitcher. They needed whenever you could see he really didn't have that many games pitched that year. And so, they need Vic Sorrel. They need Vic Sorrel. They need to step up.
How did he do?
Well, so I thought you're never going to ask that question. So anyway, Vic comes in.
I want to know.
So Vic comes in, and let me just make sure I get the score right.
Yeah.
Because I got the notes written down here. So Vic comes in, and the Tigers win 3-1. Vic pitches a gem, like one of the most important and best games of his life, really.
Right.
And so there's like three pitchers, and then one of the great stories too is Ray Hayworth, who was the backup catcher. He was a tremendous. Like I can't wait to talk about Ray Hayworth. In fact, when they were making a trade, when they were buying Mickey Cochran, the A's wanted the Tigers to throw in Ray Hayworth as part of the deal.
Yeah.
And the Tigers refused.
Nice.
They wouldn't even part with Ray Hayworth. Ray Hayworth was a backup catcher, but he was an elite defensive player. He was a solid offensive hitter, but he was an elite defender. And so he played a lot. I mean, Ray Hayworth was in a lot. So Mickey Cochran, a lot of times Mickey would, because catchers take a lot of beatings. They take a beating all year long.
God, yeah.
And so Mickey felt comfortable knowing that he could take a game off, and that Ray Hayworth would be a great catcher for the game, and then Mickey could use himself as a pinch hitter and come in for the important moments of games to get those. He may have. I got to check my records, but he may have even pitch hit himself in that ninth inning game that I talked about with that home run. In fact, I think he did.
Yeah.
Was he pinch hit? He brought himself in off the bench because he's the manager. He gets to decide when he uses himself, one of his team's best hitters.
All right, I got this, fellas.
Exactly. He comes in as to pinch hit for an incredibly important moment. So having Ray Hayworth allowed him to do that. Anyways, Ray Hayworth was because Ray Hayworth had been with the team as long as Vic Sorrel had been, like at least since the late 20s. And so he was great friends with Vic, and he mentions it in the quote at the end that I keep talking about, where it's like their favorite moments. That he says at the end of that that game in the ninth inning, that there was potentially a run about to score in the ninth inning on Vic Sorrel, and that he literally muscled the guy. That the guy came around third, and back then, a catcher could football block into somebody to keep them from touching the plate. And so he knew that the ball was running a little bit late, and that he gave this guy the shove, caught the ball, tagged him out, and preserved the victory. He got a black eye as a result. He actually talks about it. He got a black eye from hitting this guy. So
6 foot tall, 180 pounds.
Ray Hayworth, Ray Hayworth was great. He went in there. It was I got to check the exact number. But I believe it was 100. It was at least 100 straight games. It might have been 103 or something.
Okay.
But he went 100 straight games without making an error, which for a catcher, that's incredible. It wasn't broken. That streak was not broken until Yogi Berra broke it. He was a tremendous catcher for the Yankees in the 1950s. Until Yogi Berra broke it, but until then, Ray Hayworth had the longest streak of errorless games, and so he was tremendous. But anyway, so this victory, they say this was just such a huge thing, because what ended up happening was General Crowder came in on the next day, and won, and then the Tigers beat the Yankees for Crowder's start. I think it was the next day, or at least probably the next day, if not the day after that. But it was the very next game. And the Tigers behind General Crowder win the next game, and they moved into a tie with the Yankees for first place. And again, that was July 23rd.
Okay.
So you see the evolution here. So May 30th, 5th place. June 20th, 4th place. They're starting to escalate a little bit. June 30th to July 7th, 10-game winning streak with Mickey Cochran, with that Mickey Cochran home run. And then July 23rd, Vic Sorrel in this game. Crowder the very next day, the Tigers move into a tie with the Yankees, and then they never look back. They just kept on winning, and they edged it out for the pennant. And so September 21st, they clinched the pennant that year.
Wow.
Yep.
So how many games did they have left? You said September 21st?
September 21st. I'd have to look at it.
Yeah. But September 21st, they had it
July,
cinched for a
August,
while.
September. So there was 2 months left.
Wow.
And they played great the rest of the season.
So that's early in the season to have it cinched up.
Well, for the September 21st, the World Series was not. It's not that early. Well, a little bit actually, yeah, because the World Series was, I think, it was October 3rd.
Yeah,
was the beginning of the World Series, October 1st, October 3rd.
Yeah,
so it was. Yeah, no, it was like 9 days. At least a week. But they crushed it. But they crushed it. The rest of the season, they just were killing everybody. And in fact, they went on a losing streak at the end of the year. I think it was an 8-game losing streak at the end of the year, which people were like, "Oh man, are they going to be able to?" Because the worst thing for them was that they went on an 8-game, something like a 7 or 8 game losing streak at the end of the year. And the Cubs went on a 21-game winning streak to propel themselves into the 1935 World Series. So going into that World Series, the Cubs were the hottest team in baseball, and the Tigers were the coldest team. They just lost 8 games in a row. So it was like 8 out of 9, but it was an ugly little losing streak that they had to finish off their year. But yeah, you can just kind of see the dynamic of this season, how they started, and then there's a couple of these really key moments. There's probably a million other ones too, of course.
Yeah.
But there's one more little element too, with regards to the importance. We talked about it on a previous show about just about Hank Greenberg, and just this like the next Babe Ruthian figure in this year.
Because he's top of the pops with everything.
Everything.
With them that year.
He's one of the greatest hitters of all time.
Yeah.
He's one of the greatest hitters of all time. And we mentioned, 1933, Hank Greenberg was just trying to get a starting job. I mean, 33, he was just trying to, he actually went to Frank Navin and says, you either play me or trade me or something because I want to play. He's playing on Belle Isle with kids on sandlot ball just to stay in game shape.
Yeah.
Because he was never playing. And so... in 34, of course, so he wins the job really at the end of 1933. Plays well enough to win the job going into 34, and it's in 34 that he breaks out and becomes one of the great hitters in all of baseball, and that helps to propel the Tigers to the World Series. And then in 35, Greenberg is on a whole nother level. Yeah. He is literally on a whole nother level. I mean, he is like I'm talking about. He's not just on another level for the Tigers. He's on another level for all of Major League Baseball. I mean, I have a great little fact here that I think is going to put into context just how big he was. Because we mentioned the Tigers were start off bad in the beginning of this season, but it could have been way worse without Hank Greenberg. Okay, he was literally the only person, like one of the only. I mean, he was the catalyst that gave them what wins they did get in the beginning. He carried them almost by himself through the first part of the season, and so. So just to give you an idea of how big he was, the statistic of runs batted in, RBIs, and so by the All-Star game, which I don't know if you want to look up the date of the All-Star game because I don't have it off the top of my head, but by the All-Star game, Hank Greenberg had 110 RBIs. Okay, that's like the All-Star game is halfway point of the season generally speaking. So he has 110 RBIs by the All-Star game. Okay. Just to give you a frame of reference, Lou Gehrig, by the time the season finished, Hank Greenberg, he finished the year with 170 RBIs, Hank Greenberg, okay? But just to put into context how many that is, the number 2 player in baseball that year was Lou Gehrig, and he had 119 RBIs for the season. That was
July 8th in 1935.
July 8th, there you go. Yeah. So anyways, by July 8th, looking at my notes here, that's the Tigers had just had that 10-game win streak.
Yeah.
By July 8th, Hank Greenberg's got 110 RBIs. And I can say, Lou Gehrig for the full season at 119. He's one of the best hitters in the game. Lou Gehrig had his own seasons where he had 160 or 170.
Yeah.
Lou Gehrig was no stranger to getting RBIs by that huge number. But but Hank, 110 RBIs for the first, how many games that is, 60 games of the year.
Yeah.
50, what is that? 154 divided by 2. It's I couldn't get my calculator. That's awful. What is that?
77?
77, whatever.
70,
so he's averaging over RBI every single game, almost 2 RBIs a game for the first 170 game season. He's having an RBI. More than one a game.
Jeez.
You know what I mean? He's driving in at least one run every single
He played
game.
152 games, and he had 170 RBIs.
Yes,
so,
that's what I'm saying. At least one every game. That's what it averages out to. And in many games, I'm sure he has 4 or 5 in that clip.
Yeah.
So he's just that's what I'm saying.
He's a monster. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. He's a perfect word. He's a monster. And this is a guy like... it just shows you if you have a guy in the first half of your season that's got 110, that's literally got the same number of runs driven in as like the next best guy has for the entire season.
Yeah.
You see that how much. I mean, literally the other team was that, the rest of the players on that team were that bad. If a guy could have that many, one man, and they couldn't just blow everybody out, you know what I mean? Like if the Tigers, the other guys would have been playing anywhere near, peak levels, they would have been killing people with a guy that's got on a tear like that. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So really, that's another component of the story that's really, and I thought that fact really does a good idea to point out just how big.
Hammerin' Hank.
Yeah, Hank Greenberg.
Hammerin' Hank
absolute
Greenberg.
Absolute monster, yeah. So anyways, yeah, so those are that's pretty much, we actually went through most of my notes here. It's
cool. So we'll talk about the series itself on its own.
Yeah.
We'll do that, and
yeah, we want to bunch all
get to that, but we want to
put all the. I want to put. That's what I think that we were talking about this earlier. I want to put all the championships together in a batch because I want to do because we also talked about this the idea of separating the stories. When you say like we talk about the World Series now, then we talk about the 35 World Series now, and then we don't talk about the Lions championship for another 5, 6, 7 episodes, however long.
Yeah.
And then you start to lose the connection between them. That's what I'm saying. Like I like the idea of doing it rapid fire.
Well, maybe in the next time we'll talk about the Lions. We'll start diving into
Tiger fans. We got some stuff.
Bringing
to talk
those
about,
Portsmouth Spartans up here, and
I've been down to Portsmouth too. They revere that team.
Yeah.
They still have the original stadium is still built. They do fundraisers to keep it clean. It's an NFL, 1930s NFL stadium that's still in excellent condition. It was the last team to use it was the Portsmouth Spartans.
Ah,
yeah,
that is amazing.
Yep.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit Lions next time, and Detroit City of Champions. The website, Charles, is
DetroitCityOfChampions.com. Easiest website in the world to remember.
That is it. So, if you've lasted this long, and I've been putting some episodes out, and people are commenting and being very complimentary.
Oh, good.
And people have been enjoying it. So we greatly appreciate everybody who's
absolutely, Thanks
tuned
for
in
watching,
and sharing these stories. I love these stories. It's
I love telling
people. I tell people I got a sports podcast, and they're like, "You?" Because I'm not a sports guy, but I love these stories. I love the history.
Jamie, you're getting into it, man. You're starting to use some terms. I was like, you got it, man. Yeah, picking up some dates and all. You're starting to get it.
It's all on the web. Yeah, I keep looking at that because you said it is a decent site, that VintageDetroit.com.
Oh, it's a great site. I highly recommend. I get little emails from them all the time. I love it. They got some great writers on there too.
Yeah,
yep, highly recommended.
So, we'll do it again. Detroit City of Champions podcast. Until next time.
Excellent. Good show, Jamie. Yep.